Okay, welcome everybody. It's 7 o'clock. We're going to get this thing kicked off. I'm Hannah. I'm playing your MC host for tonight, and you have joined the virtual town hall asking the question, can policymakers keep America's promise to Ohio veterans? And truly, thank you so much for taking time out of your life and all of the stuff that's going on in your life to learn a little bit with us, and also to share how some of these policies, federal policies, some of the federal changes, some of the state changes, how this is showing up in your life. So thank you. Again, I'm Hannah. I am the executive director of a group called Policy Matters Ohio. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank. We look at how well state policy and sometimes federal policy is treating the everyday Ohioan. Is it making Ohio the kind of place where anybody, regardless of race, zip code, what they ate for breakfast, can make it, can have a shot at having a good and decent life? And part of that work is looking at how federal and state policies are showing up for people. And one of the things that we've been trying to track is how those policies are showing up for veterans. So if you like what you hear tonight and you're more interested in learning more about us, you can connect with us through our Saturday Stats newsletter. This will be linked in the materials you receive after this webinar or on all of the social medias. So why are we doing this now? Well, it's because the big budget bill is done and the state budget bill is done. And we know that there's a lot of changes happening both through those policy changes, but also things like the VA workforce reductions, the ending of most VA union contracts, and just the ongoing uncertainty of real life in this space. And so we wanted to try to create some room to help folks connect with some of the experts and with some of the policy experts to just get us closer to understanding what actually is going on. And, you know, I will say that while we may have a lot of the answers, we might not have all of the answers. So if we don't, please let us know so we can do that follow-up, okay? And so why are we thinking about veterans, and why is this policy impact moment so important? Well, I'm just going to give you this slide. So we know that the changes coming down through just one aspect of the big budget bill from the federal government is going to change ACA marketplace coverage. And we know that a lot of disabled veterans in Ohio are living below the poverty line. And so we know that through these changes, we're going to see a lot of folks who are already struggling have to figure out how to do with maybe less. And so we want to try to build some resources, some community connections to try to hopefully give people a little bit of a better foothold on things. And I also wanted to share with folks before we get into the presentation just a little bit on, like, why is all of this happening? If there's all of these cuts going on to Medicaid, to food assistance, changes to the marketplace, cutting jobs from the VA workforce and lots of other federal workers being cut, where's all this money going? And we know that part of the driver of these changes is to be able to pay for these tax cuts that are coming down. So I'm going to share with you, and this will be in the packet of materials that you get after this, some of the impacts of where those tax cuts are going to hit. Because it's not a tax cut for the majority of people, not a tax cut for the majority of Ohioans. As you can see, the vast majority of that tax cut, more than 70%, just goes to the richest 20%, right? So those are folks who are earning just lots more money, probably don't need a tax cut, certainly don't need a tax cut at the expense of food, medical care, and ensuring that our veterans here get what they need and were promised. Okay, here we go. All right. Ohio's doing the same thing with our taxes. We're losing about 13 billion in revenue a year because of tax cuts. And again, these tax cuts that we're hearing from the state budget, they're not coming into the middle class. They're not coming into those who are working poor. They're primarily benefiting the top 20%. And here, Ohio, the top 1% of Ohio earners getting the biggest benefit from those tax cuts. While the rest of the folks, we try to figure out how are we going to fund our schools? How are we funding childcare? How are we ensuring basic health access for all people? So, you know, we're wanting to track some of the impacts of these bills and of these policy changes, of the cuts. And that's part of this conversation here tonight, is to learn from you all who have joined us. What's going on? What are you seeing? What do you think is feeling like a threat? And have our wonderful special guests, the list here is on your screen, share what they know about what's coming, what's available as a resource, and how folks can maybe work together to try to mitigate the worst of some of these new changes. I will cede the panel here, the podium, the virtual podium, and invite Nick to come up. Nick's with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. He's going to give us an overview of some of these changes. So Nick, I will turn it over to you with that.
Well, thank you, Hannah, and thanks to Policymakers Ohio for bringing us all together on this very important topic. And for the veterans who may be listening tonight, thank you for your service to our nation. I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the large, very large budget bill that Hannah mentioned that Congress passed almost 2 months ago now, and look at its potential impacts on veterans in Ohio. So if we can go to the next screen. So as Hannah mentioned, there are a lot of provisions in this bill. It cuts across a variety of policy areas, but the two biggest things it does is it has massive tax cuts, primarily oriented towards the highest earners, and has historically big cuts in both SNAP and Medicaid. The $1 trillion in Medicaid and ACA cuts are the biggest in Medicaid's history. And the nearly $200 billion in cuts to SNAP are the biggest cuts in that program's history. So enormous cuts, and yet as big as they are, they don't quite fully offset the amount that is allocated in the bill for tax cuts for individuals earning over $500,000 per year. So that just gives you kind of a sense of the basic math of this bill. If we can go to the next slide. And so what does that mean for Ohio? Well, huge cuts to Medicaid, cuts to the ACA, the failure of the bill to extend important tax credits under the ACA is going to mean hundreds of thousands of people in Ohio are going to lose their health coverage in coming years. There are a variety of effective dates in this bill. It's not going to all happen at once. But the first thing that will probably happen is people are going to lose health coverage because these tax credits are not extended that provide assistance for people who are getting coverage in the ACA marketplaces. That's going to happen by the end of this year unless Congress does something soon. The legislation that passed also has a lot of cost shifts to states. States are going to have to pick up more costs, and they're going to have to figure out how they're going to pay for that. Are they going to cut things? Are they going to raise taxes? What are they going to do? One of the examples is they're going to have to pay more for SNAP food benefit costs. And again, for Ohio, that could be hundreds of millions of dollars. In terms of the impact on taxes, you'll see just from that third bullet, the very wealthy get huge tax cuts. The low income get almost nothing, while also being targeted by the cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. And although the bill did increase the child tax credit by $200 per child, it doesn't apply to many children. A lot of children are not going to get that increase, including 650,000 children in Ohio, 25,000 of which live in veteran families. So we can go to the next slide. So what does that mean for veterans? Well, a lot of veterans depend on Medicaid and SNAP. These are national numbers on this slide, 1.2 million veterans receiving SNAP and 1.6 million receiving Medicaid. But if you look at even a more comprehensive measure in terms of Ohio, if we can move to the next slide, nearly 1 out of every 4 veterans in Ohio lived in a household that received food assistance from SNAP or health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program, at some point in 2023. So these are critical programs that veterans depend on that are being cut under this legislation. If we can move to the next slide. So this slide just gives you a quick sense of who is getting the veterans that are getting SNAP. This is a national slide. Most are male, but beyond that, there's a fair amount of diversity in terms of age, race, disability status, whether they're a parent or not. A lot of folks are getting these benefits, and across communities in Ohio and all across the nation. Go to the next slide. So there are a lot of cuts in this bill that affect both Medicaid and that affect SNAP. I'm not going to really get into these in any detail, but I did want to focus on one, which is work requirements. That's that big lighter blue box on the left-hand side. And the B's in all these parentheses stand for billions of dollars. So these are huge cuts. $326 billion for work requirements alone are going to be cut from the Medicaid program. So if we can move to the next slide. So what does that mean for Medicaid in Ohio? So the new law will take Medicaid coverage away from people in Ohio's Medicaid expansion, including veterans who can't document that they meet rigid work requirements. And in Ohio, that means, somewhere between 300,000 and 500,000 people will be at risk of losing their Medicaid coverage because of these work requirements. Not all those people will lose, but they're going to be at risk. They're going to be tied into this new system. The Congressional Budget Office, which is kind of Congress's estimator, has projected that nationwide over 5 million adults will lose their Medicaid coverage under this new work requirements. And listen, we've seen work requirements play out in other states when they've experimented with them. And what we've seen is that there isn't an increase in employment. What there is an increase in is people losing their health coverage. People who should be exempt because of disabilities or health conditions, but end up not getting the exemption, or people who are actually working but can't illustrate that because they get caught up in bureaucratic red tape, and the requirements don't account for unique barriers to employment that veterans face, including health conditions that they may have gotten through service. So there are a lot of problems with these work requirements. They end up causing a lot of people to lose coverage. In terms of the timeline for that provision, it's basically by the end of 2026 that states are going to have to implement these new work requirements for Medicaid recipients. States can implement a little before that if they choose to. They can try to get a delay, but they have to apply for that. So there's some wiggle room here, but basically we're talking about the end of 2026 or the beginning of 2027. Next slide, please. And so there's also new requirements here for SNAP. Now, SNAP already has a really harsh work requirement for adults without children. They basically lose their SNAP benefits after 3 months if they're not working at least 20 hours a week. But what this legislation did was it expanded that dramatically. It included, for the first time, older adults aged 55 to 64. It included parents of teenage children. And it eliminated an exemption that we now have for veterans. Veterans are exempt from the SNAP work requirement. Under current law, or I should say prior law, but now under this new law, veterans will be pulled in and will be required to meet the SNAP work requirement. And the Congressional Budget Office, again, has estimated that this expanded work requirement will eliminate food assistance for 2.4 million people nationwide. Now, unlike Medicaid, there was not a specific implementation date for this provision. Usually that means fairly immediate implementation. So we're waiting for guidance from federal authorities about when this will take place, but this is going to be something soon that's going to occur probably this year. We're going to start to see the effects of this expanded work requirement for SNAP recipients. So we can go to the next slide. So just, in conclusion, this is an enormous bill that has huge effects in a variety of areas, but it's very clear that over time, it's going to directly threaten health care coverage under Medicaid and food assistance under SNAP for millions of people across the country, including veterans in Ohio. So I'd love to take some questions when we get to that point. And I know there are a lot of other issues that are affecting veterans, including some of the things that Hannah mentioned in the opening, but I will leave it there.
All right, Nick, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's it looks pretty rough. It looks pretty rough for veterans. It looks pretty much for just Ohioans who are maybe struggling to put ends together, make ends meet, get access to health insurance, get access to health care. You know, Nick, one of the things that we often hear is like, well, people should be working if they're getting a benefit. And I think that sometimes sounds like common sense to folks. Could you maybe talk about a little bit more about why work requirements have really nothing to do with work as we bring in the next presenter up?
Certainly. So, I mean, part of the issue is that sometimes people have lost employment. They're looking for a new job. They're in transition. Those people get caught up in work requirements. There are people that have a variety of conditions, including disabilities, that make it hard to return to work or go to work. They get caught up in work requirements. You have people who are actually working. They are working, but they don't work enough hours, or for whatever reason, they don't have the right documentation to prove that they are working. Those people get caught up in work requirements. And so again, we've seen this doesn't really promote work. It just is really another way to cut benefits.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. You know, Ohio just passed in this last budget season or last General Assembly passed a bill to require employers to give their employees a pay stub. So we just got that requirement on the books in Ohio. So folks getting caught up in red tape and the bureaucracy of just proving their eligibility is very, very real in a state like Ohio. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll have next up Chris Ericksen, I should say President Ericksen, who is with UWUA Local 270 as the president of the UWUA National Veterans Committee chair. So, Chris, you want to come up and maybe give us some context about what some of these big federal changes are looking like here in the state of Ohio?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Hannah and the folks at Policy Matters have asked me to talk about a number of things tonight. So I think the best way to cover everything is to start with an overarching theme and then work down to some specifics. So incidentally, before we get too deep into this, I learned a valuable lesson on Monday. During our prep call, the folks at Policy Matters, they are statistics and numbers people. Me, not so much. If you have a specific statistical question, they are your folks. They are really crackerjack. They're uber prepared and definitely do their due diligence. So the theme and the concept that I want to start with and end with tonight is the practice of loving the soldier and disregarding the veteran. Perhaps you've seen this. You're probably more likely to see it now more than ever. Um, you know the people that I'm talking about. They wave the biggest flag. They're the ones that always talk about how much they support and love the troops. This became very fashionable after 9/11. So often, those same people, be it our elected officials or the voting public who elected them, cannot wait to cut entitlement programs. I hate to use that expression. What we're really talking about here is our brothers and sisters in need. These benefits, these programs affect veterans. It could be directly or it could be indirectly. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a minute. These folks preach fiscal conservatism, but they do not take into account the lifelong partnership and those binding commitments made between the United States government and those who volunteered or were drafted into the service of this nation. It isn't a secret that many vets have a difficult time after discharge. I consider myself to be very fortunate. After my hitch, I was discharged relatively intact. I really wasn't much worse off much worse for wear. Like I said, consider myself to be fortunate, but there are many vets who suffer from poor health, be it physical, mental, or emotional. And what this does is causes a cascade effect, making employment and life in general difficult. This is the exact reason that many veterans have a tough time making ends meet. As a result of that, they depend on federal assistance programs like Medicaid and SNAP. Sometimes this is in addition to or in place of any benefits that they can utilize from the VA. For example, as already mentioned, many veterans use Medicaid as their primary source of healthcare coverage. But not every veteran qualifies for VA coverage. Me, for example, I do not. I was in for 4 years, so I didn't retire from the Navy, and I don't have any diagnosed or reported service-related health issues. At this point in my life, at least, I don't qualify. There are many people out there in the same position as me. Likely as many as half of all veterans are in that position. Keeping that in mind, a cut to any entitlement program is a direct shot at the veteran community. A cut to any of those entitlement programs is as much a shot at the veteran community as a shot at the VA would be. So while we're on the subject of the VA, federal government is the largest employer of veterans in the United States. So I'm gonna sneak a statistic in here. 28% of all VA employees are armed forces veterans. When the administration makes cuts or changes to employment policies, like with collective bargaining, that's another shot at the veteran community. That when this administration guts the Social Security offices, that is a shot at not only the veterans behind the desks, but those that are standing in line. Many veterans leave their service and work whole careers paying into SSI. Like any other part of the population, the veteran community can become disabled for many non-service related reasons. In that case, they would need to be able to collect SSI disability. When the administration makes cuts to the post office, that is a shot at veterans. I'm watching this happen in real time. I see and I talk with the union leadership from the AFGE. They are the ones that represent the workers at the VA and at Social Security. I talk with them and the letter carriers pretty regularly. We sort of travel in the same circles. The US Post Office employs 70,000 veterans. For them, the concern is always about job security. There's been very little good news, well, for about the last 8 months with the AFGE. It has been constant worry, and everything is in flux all the time for them. As you all know, the post office has been under attack for years. I'm sure it's already been mentioned. I'm sure you all know that the Trump administration just canceled or rescinded the labor contracts for the employees of the VA. So let me talk for just a second about the value of collective bargaining in the workplace and how it helps not only the employees of the VA and other federal agencies, but it helps the veterans in general and the general public who are being seen or treated. Collective bargaining isn't just about wages or benefits. It's about staffing. It's about workload. It's about protecting those that protect us. It's about nipping problems in the bud so they don't grow, become large scale problems that can affect the services provided. It's about a safe workplace. And in the case of the VA, a safe workplace benefits employees and customers alike. That affects veterans on both sides of the equation. So something that the Utility Workers Union, that's my union, has identified and become concerned with is the ability for veterans to reach out to mental health hotlines. Right now, veterans can get emergency mental health help by calling 988. Being proactive and seeing the writing on the wall, we're working on establishing an internal hotline staffed 24 hours a day by our membership. Members of my Veterans Committee are being trained right now. Once we get the committee trained, we're going to open it up to the general membership. The training is being provided by an organization called QPR, who specializes in this type of training. For us, this was something that was too important to leave up in the air. It's too important to worry about potential staffing cuts or the elimination of an entire federal program for budgetary reasons. So once this is up and running for us at the Utility Workers Union, I sincerely hope that the phone never rings, but if it does, we'll be ready. I would encourage other groups to take proactive measures as well. Identify the things that concern you and your partners and the things that concern you the most, and then figure out a way to fill in those blanks. So one last point to be made tonight, then I'll bring this home. This is a statistic that I bet Policy Matters doesn't have. First a disclaimer. This info is about 4 years old. It hasn't been updated in a while. I don't know that they're necessarily tracking this, but there was a lot of information on it from about 4 years ago. Of the 18 million veterans in the US, 17 of them are billionaires. So if you are one of those 17 people, this administration has looked out for your best interest more than any of the previous ones. For the remaining 17,999,983 of us, we should be worried. I really wish that more veterans would think about these things before they fill out their ballots. It isn't always about the Pentagon budget. That's the love the troops part. Sometimes it's about what happens when those troops get home and keeping the commitments made to our veterans that were made on the day they enlisted. So thank you all very much. I appreciate the opportunity to have spoken with you. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer.
President Ericksen, my goodness, when are you running for something? When can we get?
Well, I am the
Can
president
we
currently.
volunteer you for some additional office that we can vote for? Because
My plate is pretty full, Hannah.
the
But
truth
thank
that
you.
is being spoken, let me tell you, it really does feel like this is coming at people from all sides. It's not just how you said it's not just the veteran or the person that's standing in line for the program or the service, but it's the veteran that's standing behind the desk whose job is also getting cut. And many of them lost their union representation. It really is a fracturing of the deal, and it's the deal that's been made with people when they're enlisting, and it's the deal that we've been made generally as people here in this country. We were told, go to school, do the right thing. You're going to have the basics taken care of, whether that's a solid education, food on your plate. You're going to be able to do that. And it's just not happening for so many of us. It's just not there. So thank you so much for those comments. We'll check the Q&A, and I'll invite Jeremy Parkins to come up. And while Jeremy's coming online, I want to share with you all just Policy Matters Ohio. We are the numbers people, but numbers only do so much unless you can give a real compelling one like that 17 billionaire stat. That's pretty good. Numbers can only do so much. So we're going to drop our story bank link into the chat. So if you are experiencing something, crazy wait times, unable to access services, something going on that you need to share your story with someone, this is a place to drop that. We can use these to better understand these impacts and help inform our work and what we're communicating to decision makers. So that will be in your chat. And Jeremy, you want to come up and give us some information about Dress Right Dress and what you're seeing in your world?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Like everybody before me, I want to thank everybody that's tuning in. I want to thank Policy Matters Ohio for the invite, John Ryan specifically for reaching out to me and asking me to be part of this. Before I get started in my spiel, I want to give a little background to myself and what our organization does. I am a fast talker, so I know we were given a green light of 7 to 8 minutes. I'm going to beat my GPS time. So if you know what that means. So Dress Right Dress, I founded Dress Right Dress, conceptualized in 2015 to give information and resources to veterans that were going through transitional hardships. And I never wanted to get into mental health. I never wanted to do certain things. However, loss of a service member buddy or a brother of mine due to potential suicide led to us exploring mental health more, so on and so forth. Dress Right Dress was formed into a 501c3 nonprofit in 2019. We became Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services certified in 2021, and then we became Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction Reentry certified in 2022. Our mission is to assist veterans through transitional hardships, whether it be employment, just involvement, housing issues, whatever. We have a primary focus or a primary program that is just involved. That's us going inside the prisons, jails, or through veterans courts, or trying to implement change. When I got asked to be a part of this, I was all for it, especially when we start talking about federal cuts to certain programs. And the theme seems to be talking about Medicaid and SNAP specifically. So I do want to touch on that briefly with what we do. So with Medicaid, one of the statistics we do have is that roughly 40% of all veterans that use Medicaid are solely reliant on Medicaid. As Chris said before me, a lot of people have this misconception that VA care is the be-all, end-all for veteran care and benefits. That is false. Policy changes on both sides of the aisle, both good and bad, have affected eligibility and may make it where somebody is not eligible. They may have served honorably, they may have done certain things for their country, but they might not be eligible for VA care. Additionally, the VA recently came out about 3 years ago and admitted that they were unable to take care of 19 million veterans or 18 million, whatever the number is. For example, the statistics that you've seen earlier through Policy Matters and the information Chris provided, you can calculate that Ohio, number 6 out of 50 states for veteran population with roughly 865,000 vets. 5 major VA hospitals comes out to roughly 175,000 veterans per hospital. So imagine 175,000 patients going to your local hospital and trying to get care. It can't be done. Then Dress Right Dress approached state and federal legislators when something happened a few years ago, which was the Mission Act. The Mission Act, we've seen federal changes where it started affecting VA services and benefits, but more directly, those hospitals. Myself, with certain state and federal legislators and their teams, stood in the forefront of the battleground to stop the closure of VAs. People don't realize that in Appalachia, Ohio, Chillicothe, Ohio specifically, we almost lost the entire VA campus. And then it followed the Ohio River Valley or the Appalachia Valley, and it went through Huntington, and it started going up, and we started seeing more services and potential loss of VA facilities. So what does that mean? That means that if those facilities aren't there to provide those services, then our Ohio service members, veterans, our brothers and sisters have to rely on state or local benefits and service entities. So what happens from there is that you see them getting on Medicaid or whatnot. The issue is when there's federal cuts in addition to, say, hospitals or VA hospitals or clinics, you have to think about it. You might not see it immediately. It might not be in your forefront. It might not be in your community, but you got to think about those communities where there's a high veteran population, but low resources, specifically Appalachia, Ohio. You can actually look at a map. You can look this up. There is a map that talks about resources in Appalachia, Ohio, specifically for veterans. When we talk about mental health, we're always talking about PTSD, suicide rates. Everybody cares. I love what Chris said about love the soldier and leave the veteran, because we always talk about veteran suicide rates and all this and that. But then when it comes to budget cuts, nobody's thinking about the cuts that are cutting care to provide those benefits for people to seek mental health care. So when you have a VA closure, potentially because budget cuts, and then you have Medicaid closures or deficit, then what happens is you have veterans that have no care, no access to care for their mental health or physical health. And when you start talking about Appalachia, Ohio, back to the map I was mentioning, Ohio and the Appalachian area is resource poor. That's very rich in culture. It's very rich in veteran population. The Chillicothe VA is probably one of the best VAs. I'm biased, but that I've ever been to. But when they were going to close it, we found thousands upon thousands upon thousands of veterans that would not have had access to care had that happened. And that was due to a potential budget cut. Luckily, they ended up overturning it, so on and so forth. But we've seen an influx in requests for services through us, through our Veteran Service Office counterparts or partners, and other veteran-ran organizations. So real quick, when these budget cuts were happening and people were scrambling for care or services, we seen in our organization 75% of people that utilize our services look for veteran-specific benefits, including eligibility and compensation, along with housing. That was another issue. 58% were looking for employment, and then it goes down from there, where we have 42% and 50% for transportation and food assistance, and then it goes down to utility assistance, etc. So we had an increase in requests for services and benefits because the VA did not have funding for those through like HUD-VASH, SSVF. And then we also seen that the requirements were changing for veterans to seek care because of the claims or eligibility requirements. Additionally, we had secondary needs where veterans were looking for counseling and family support. These veterans that are reliant on Medicaid or VA compensation were looking for counseling, because if the VA would have closed, what would have happened to those services? Where would they have sought them? In some cases, we found out veterans would have had to travel 4 hours or more to go to another regional VA hospital. Lastly, additional resources that were requested specific to mental health and substance use disorders among veterans. We had 67% for both mental health care and AANA. We had 22% for SUDS case management requests, and then 11% for physical health care. The VA is not the end-all be-all for veteran care. A lot of veterans do not qualify for VA, and therefore they are reliant upon other benefits, other services. We actually requested state legislators work with their federal counterparts 2 years ago that they automatically enroll or make eligible service members getting out of the service for a period of up to 1 year or more to allow that veteran to work and navigate the VA system for claims and compensation. And then for Guard and Reserve, which is another eligibility criteria, to seek or be automatically enrolled for up to 3 years, and then ask that Ohio not make disability part of your overall household income when applying to benefits. And we were requesting this because we were seeing the budget cuts coming from the federal government down, and then we were worried about what was going to happen with the VA and other things such as compensation. So with that, I have nothing more. I think Ohio is a great state. We are doing a great job at trying to be veteran friendly, but I always think there's more we can do. I think with the federal government and the budget cuts, we just watched this. I just talked about this in the prep meeting for this. When they started proposing budget cuts to SAMHSA grants, which is mental health, we are operating currently with our Justice Involved program off a SAMHSA grant, where we're going into the prisons and working with the veteran inmates. And they paused it. We didn't know if we were going to get paid. And I'm asking Ohio to be the safety net and say, hey, look, we need to understand that the VA is not the end all be all. The county veteran service office, a lot of them do a great job. They cannot have the budget to do everything. They do not provide direct care, etc., and maybe have initiatives to fund veteran projects or veteran initiatives, such as veteran nonprofits. If you look at the success rate of, and this is not to demonize anybody, but if you look at the success rates of veteran courts or veteran peer programs, they have a higher success rate than their civilian counterpart. So I think investing in those type of programs as a state could benefit Ohio veterans. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for Dress Right Dress. Thanks for doing this tonight. And I think one of the things we always hear, well, we just don't have the money to fund all this stuff. Like maybe there's some good ideas there, but Ohio doesn't have the money and we
So I
got to
won't-
cut back. We know better. We
So
know
I
better.
won't say exactly how I said it. I don't know if John Ryan was in the room when I said this, but when they were closing the Chillicothe VA, and you can actually look this up, I'm on the picture. We had a town hall meeting at the American Legion in Chillicothe, Post 62 in Chillicothe. And the subject, we don't have the money, came up.
That's right.
And I said, and I won't say it verbatim, but I said, basically, you have no problem writing a check for war, but when it comes back to providing those services and benefits, now there's an issue.
Yeah.
And
Now we're broke.
that was the other thing we talked to the federal government about, was there needs to be a war tax. If you're going to impose war for whatever reason, I'm a vet, I believe in securing America and all that. But if you're going to propose a war, there should be a war tax where you're going to take a certain percentage of that budget and you're going to set it aside for those coming home from that war. So there's a lot of different ideas we've kicked around, and we've talked to both state and federal legislators, both Democrat and Republican. I'm sure we can all attest that we've seen good and bad policies from both sides. But I love what Chris said earlier. When you start, when you can't see it in front of you, when it's not in your hometown, like I lived in Chillicothe when this was happening. And I'm in the prisons every day, and I'm doing it like I'm in the trenches every day. If you're not in the forefront of that and you don't see it, you don't think about how it's going to affect your neighbor, right? And that's a sad fact when we start talking about veterans. And that's why I loved Chris's spiel about, love the soldier and leave the veteran. And it's like, I talk about this every day where there's no more ticker tape parades when vets come home from war and you got a guaranteed job and you're going to make, $80,000 a year or whatever, because of stigma or what resources, et cetera. And then when we talk about suicide statistics, and I won't hold you up, I know you guys are trying to move on, but when you talk about suicide statistics, look at also the homeless statistics and look at the just involved statistics and look at the causation, lack of resources, lack of housing, lack of employment opportunities. And when we start cutting we start cutting those hand up benefits, not a handout, a hand up, right? And we start cutting those, and then we see the increase in suicide rates and we go, oh, well, we don't know what's going on. We're going to have no problem passing another bill, but those rates aren't changing.
That's right. That's right. That's
So-
exactly right. We have all the money in the world to put people in harm's way, but we're broke whenever they come home. We have all the money for tax cuts for the top 20%, the top 1%, but we don't have money to make sure that the program that you're running for veteran mental health stays funded, can actually staff up to meet all of the need that's happening. And I'm glad you shared that story of Chillicothe, because it's also demonstrates that, people can still get things done, or they used to. That VA was saved because of the activity, because of what you all did down there and preserve that. And so what we're doing today, building this community together, is hopefully setting us up to a place to fend off some of the worst that's coming our way from the feds and from the state budget. So thank you so much for that, Jeremy.
And again, thanks for having me.
We are happy to host. This is this conversation has been excellent. Excellent. And we're going to zoom up to the other end of the state with two representatives from Cuyahoga County Veteran Service Commission. We're going to bring on Drew Smith and Geniece Garner, and they're going to talk a little bit about what's going on and what they're seeing in their line of work and some of the resources that might be available. Drew and Geniece, welcome to the party. Thank you for joining us. I will turn the mic over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's important to be a part of this discussion from all levels. Geniece and I are happy to be a part of this conversation. No, there's been some good information. I'm glad that we're having a well-rounded conversation. One of the challenges that we see, there's a lot of issues and a lot of potential changes coming down the pipeline. And unfortunately, you don't know where to go in a crisis until the crisis hits. So one of the missions that we kind of have from the Service Commission is to make sure that we connect the veterans to those resources before the crisis happens. A lot of people don't know about us. We've been around for quite a while, so I'll just kind of give a brief overview of who we are. We're blessed in the state of Ohio that all 88 counties have a service commission. I know that there's changes that are coming down the federal pipeline. We are funded by taxpayers' dollars. It's one of the best parts of my spiel I give, because we're not trying to sell you anything. However, we do need to get the word out that when there are changes coming down the federal pipeline, we are a resource that can be used kind of independently of that. You know, it's relief is the other part of the equation that I don't think gets enough attention and enough discussion in a lot of these conversations, particularly when the changes come. So there's, like I said, there's quite a few things that we do is we go out in the community and try to maybe ease some of the tension and some of the frustration when the veterans are going through, anxiety when these changes do come. So just kind of a brief overview of our services. We handle a lot of VA claims. We work with the VA. As far as I'm concerned, with assisting with the claims, we have a service department. All our service officers are veterans, and they assist with the VA claims, whether that's maybe addressing your discharge status or a consultation for your benefits. It's still an issue with veterans not knowing on a basic level kind of what the benefits are that they have. So that's part of what we do. Disabilities, widows' pensions, those are things that we handle. Assistance with military records, memorial affairs. One of the major issues that we've seen since the changes have been announced is veteran homelessness. Our agency, just by itself, we had an abundance of veterans who are saying, listen, I'm being evicted. There's things going on. That being the case, we've added a social work department to our agency. And we would hope that other commissions would follow suit with that. But just understanding that there's definitely a need that is changing and becoming more urgent with the veteran population. So, we work with quite a few different agencies, SSVF. We work with HUD-VASH. There's a lot of those, a lot of that funding that is potentially being cut. So we just want to make sure that we're close with those agencies to see what type of relief that we can supply. But as I mentioned with veteran homelessness, if we have a flyer that kind of lists what to do when you run across a homeless veteran. We met with councilmen and women, and that was one of the biggest issues was, okay, if we have a homeless veteran, well, what do we do with them? Nobody knew what to do. You got firefighters who come across homeless veterans. We have police officers, and just sending them to the VA and leaving them in the lobby, you don't really know kind of what to do past that. So we created a flyer that if you come across a homeless veteran or veteran in need, kind of what to do and what are the steps to take. The homeless hotline is listed on that flyer as well. But that's kind of some of the steps that we're taking at the county level to address that issue. But kind of as we mentioned with the relief, it's very difficult to get the word out there sometimes because identifying a veteran is another challenge. So we have, at the VSC, we've come up with a lot of outreach opportunities to connect the veterans to the resources. And the other flyer that we have there is our Vet Connect that's coming up on September 27th. The VA will be a part of that. They'll have a seat at the table with lots of other veteran resources. Currently, we're almost to 1,000 veterans that are registered for the event, and it's going to take place in the Cleveland Brown Stadium. We'll be in the Lake Club on that side. But we're going to have a bunch of resources that will all be there at the table to make sure that we get ahead of any major changes that are coming with our veteran community. So we got distribution items for those who are, in need of boots, jackets, just kind of those basic needs. But the other part of that, like I mentioned, is just getting ready for any changes coming down the pipeline. Financial assistance is another issue, obviously, as we have budget cuts. As I mentioned before, we do VA claims and assistance, but we also have a financial side of the house as well if you're in a crisis that happens. And I'll let Geniece go ahead and explain that.
Hey, I'm Geniece Garner. I'm the Financial Assistance Manager. Thank you, Drew, for the lead up. And then thank you, Bree, for inviting us, and Kate and Hannah as well. And then, so what the financial assistance is, currently our office, we have 5 financial assistance officers, and we provide temporary financial assistance to those veterans who are in need. And it's based on your emergency or financial hardship. And because we are in Cuyahoga County, and as Drew said, each county has a commission, so you have to apply for financial assistance in the county where you reside. So for Cuyahoga County, we have our own set of policies and procedures, and it's based on the Ohio Revised Code 5901. And it's just based on financial emergency. So in the month of July alone, because of the budget cuts, we've done more financial assistance in the month of July than we have in the last year. And that is based on all of the cuts. Just the food assistance, veterans just coming in, I can't buy food. And we're just doing food, clothes, hygiene items, and we're just doing applications just for that. And we have seen a huge uptick on that, and we'll do an application for that if they qualify. Just an honorably discharged veteran coming in and show the need, and then we can make an application for that. And then we do assist with other things. So the possible assistance, we can do your rent or mortgage, security deposit, the food, like I said, clothing, shoes, hygiene, household goods, the veteran or their dependents when they're transitioning out of homelessness, like Drew said. And that's been huge. Like you said, we have contracts with a couple of hotels where we're able to keep some veterans housed, which is good, on a temporary basis while they are waiting to get permanent housing. We do their utilities, we do dental, home repairs, car repairs. We provide medical transportation, and then any type of financial assistance need on a case-by-case basis. So if they ask us about it, we'll try to do it if we can. We'll just try to figure out a way if it's doable. And that's pretty much it. I think we're under time. If anybody have any questions for either Drew or I.
Look, you all, I just, you probably hear it a lot, but thank you for the work that you're doing. It is really incredible. And I just I'm sort of shocked. How many claims in 1 month? A year's worth of claims?
It wasn't a year's worth of claims, but the amount just for the month of July, the total in dollar amount for the July exceeded the amount that we did in 2024.
In 2024.
Yes.
So
So just the amount in July was more than the amount that we did in the whole calendar year of 2024.
So it's happening. Like
we do see the impact
it's
of
going up.
yes. And just veterans calling in, I need food. That's been the biggest thing. Elderly, I can't buy food. And we're I don't need anything but food. And if we give them because we do food cards and it's a $100 cards to Walmart. I just need $200 in food cards and they're just happy with the $200 in food cards to go to Walmart and we'll give
It's
them the food cards and it's life-changing for them.
absolutely, absolutely. And thank you all for doing it. Thank you all for sharing that. That's both to give us an idea of what kind of impact this is already happening. We know that SNAP, the Food Assistance Program, is on real shaky ground, and a lot of those federal costs are going to be pushed to the state of Ohio. And I have some real doubts on how well the state of Ohio is going to be able to manage that with our current budget. So you're doing so much. Thanking you is not enough. I wish we could actually get you more money to be able to serve more vets, reach more people. That's what I would want if I had a magic wand. So Drew, Geniece, just really excellent. And we wanted to make sure we invited folks who could offer some help, some expertise. Like, this stuff is going to happen. It's going to get a little bit harder for everybody out there. It's already hard enough. And so the work that you're doing is so important. And for folks who may be joining us and listening, wanting to know how they're going to navigate it, folks who may listen to the recording, how do we navigate all this stuff? If you're feeling some anxiety, some fear, some concern about what's coming down the road, there's resources here to help you. We're going to, you'll have some information in that packet. This excellent program that's coming up in September, 1,000 people already registered. Incredible. Incredible service.
One thing,
Incredible.
if I could just add to
Please.
the point that you're making is you don't want to wait until something happens. We
There you
know
go.
that there's changes that are coming, and one of the main missions of our event is to make sure that we do get as many vets registered with the VSC as possible. So as those changes do come, we're able to get you the assistance as quick as possible. So.
Excellent. Incredible. Thank you so much. I think we do have a question. I'm going to see if Bernard can see if it's working to ask your question to the panelists.
Okay, my concern is the employees at the VA, because they're the people who are now living with a lot of uncertainty. At first, they had a pretty steady job, but now suddenly there's genuine concern if these employees are going to continue to be employees. And that affects the services that they provide to the veterans. So I wonder if they could address that at all. Are they getting much outreach or requests from actual veterans that are employed by the VA?
Yeah.
So on the financial assistance side, actually, no, we're not getting, I have not seen any from the VA. I think in the beginning we did, but I think since most of them have returned to work, right now we haven't. But if they do happen to get laid off, we are here because if they need help and they are honorably discharged and they fall, we have it. Just an example, a couple of years ago when it was it was something going on, the government shut down and the Coast Guard wasn't getting paid. We did step in and we assisted the Coast Guard when they weren't getting paid because they fall under the Homeland Security. So we were helping the Coast Guard and their the active duty Coast Guard coasties were able to get financial assistance while they were waiting for their paychecks. So we did do that as well a couple of years ago.
If you don't mind, I'll jump in. So Bernard, that's a great question. I can only speak about what I've seen firsthand in Chillicothe when the Mission Act was going to potentially close down the Chillicothe VA and surrounding VAs. AFGE, which is the union, it's the Government Employees Union, did both in the region and through the national offices, did an amazing job at supporting their employees, whether veteran or not. They did a great job on rallying the troops and coming in and supporting those people that were uncertain. Additionally, we've seen an increase in support for employees, veteran or not, through many community agencies This is the great thing about community. Community, if you collaborate, everybody wins. And we've seen a lot of support pouring in for those individuals, veteran or not. We are a veteran-specific nonprofit, but talking to Jesse Fee, who was the union president at the Chillicothe VA at the time, we offered services to assist them if need be. If push came to shove, they were serving veterans. That's the whole job of the VA, that we were going to help any way that we could. We might not be able to provide. We're on a very minuscule budget because we're a nonprofit, and then the whole funding issue that we're talking about tonight. But we were prepared to assist if need be. Currently, with the current situation, I'm seeing a lot of uptick in concern, but I haven't seen an uptick in requesting services yet. But that doesn't mean it's not coming.
That's that being ready before the crisis, the resourcing before the crisis that Drew's talking about, that as this sort of whiplash of hirings and firings and rehirings works through the system, not sure what's going to shake out with the union contracts that were getting cut and pulled, people losing their union status, and some federal employees. I think that this is the time to kind of start pulling those community resources together and taking a look at what might be needed. Come on, Jeremy, what you got?
Oh, I was just going to add to that. Like it was an unfortunate circumstances for what happened, a few years ago because of the Mission Act and the potential closures, but people were getting prepared. There were several town halls that we attended and community meetings and et cetera. But I mentioned this in the prep meeting. So Appalachia, Ohio, again, if it's not in your backyard, you might be unaware of this. So Chillicothe, which is the Chillicothe VA, regional VA, is the hub for Appalachia, Ohio. If you don't get care at Chillicothe and you live by the Ohio River, you're either going to Huntington, which was a potential close at the same time, or you're driving to Columbus, Dayton, etc. So people were going to have to drive 4 hours, like I mentioned. But what people don't realize is the VA there is a major employer. It's one of the major employers in that region. And you would have had an influx of potential benefit need, etc. Now, what I mentioned on Monday is there's a paper mill that's been in operation for over 100 years in Chillicothe, another major employer in the region that has closed its doors. So to watch a community that has so many resources, to see this happen to them is heart-wrenching. But my point is everybody was prepared, and I think being prepared, if you know something's going on with your job, there's a potential of loss of benefits. I know as a vet working with the VSOs, and I'm 80% connected, and looking at that and wondering, what the hell is going to happen? Am I going to lose PACT Act benefits or whatever, because things fluctuate. I'm constantly prepared. And it's unfortunate that veterans have to constantly have their head on a swivel when it comes to those benefits. I know Bernard's question was about the VA employees specifically, but talking about the VA employment population of vets, that's a constant swivel that they have to be on. And I think being prepared for anything at this point is a necessity.
And that you mentioned that paper mill, that was, I don't know if this made it out to all of the statewide, but, Senator Moreno, there was a big show about saving the paper mill, and now it's closed. Didn't happen. Couldn't save it. Senator Moreno showed up. All these folks showed up. Didn't save it. We want to make sure that we're ready, that if the VA is closing in Chillicothe, they actually get to work and they save it this time for real. So thank you for mentioning that. And I don't see other questions, and we're a little past time. My takeaway for tonight is that each and every one of these panelists need to get the microphone more frequently and more often. Just such good information. We don't hear this from other spaces. So I really do thank you for joining us and for sharing with us tonight. Policy Matters has put out a little mini brief on what is some of the potential impacts that are showing up in Ohio from this legislation and in the Ohio veteran population. That's showing up in the chat. We will make sure it is in your follow-up email. You will get the slides. You will see a list of contacts who were on the panel tonight. You'll get those really great flyers that Drew and Geniece mentioned about the stand down in Cleveland, and about what do you do whenever you encounter someone who is a veteran who's also homeless. What are the resources in the county? And if you're not in Cuyahoga County, remember, these are in every part of the state. Okay, so reach out to those folks for support. If you want to tell your story, share how these impacts are showing up in your world, reach out to Policy Matters. You'll have our story bank link. And we hope to just keep the conversation going. Thank you all so, so much for making the time, whether you've joined us live tonight, if you're watching us on recording. Thank you to the panelists. Excellent, excellent work, content material. Thank you for doing the job that you're doing and for showing up with us tonight. And thank you to all of the staff behind the scenes, making the technology work, pulling us all together, creating the space and all of the materials needed just to have this conversation. Truly appreciate each and every one of you all. With that, I will let you go, and you will hear from us soon in an email. Thank you so, so much, everybody. Good night.